James and I have been in this industry long enough to recognize a red flag from a mile away, and this episode's question gave us a lot to work with. Our listener wants to know how to build out their franchise development function, but we take it back even further to how you know you're ready to franchise in the first place. If you're thinking about franchising or trying to figure out your sales process, this one's for you. Spoiler, it takes more time, more money, and more patience than most people expect. Welcome to this episode of Dear Frannie. I am your host, Katherine LeBlanc.
And I am her co-host, James.
So, James, it's been a minute since we've caught up, and I wanted to tell you about something that I've been hearing in my marketing circles that has me thinking. So, in marketing, right, we've been in the last 18 months of disruption, has been bigger disruption than we've seen in the last 20 years. And the pressures that marketers are under to kind of chase all of the things that are changing seems to be coming to a head, because what I keep hearing in my circles is, hey guys, we have to stop chasing things. And it's really interesting because I'm hearing marketers tell other marketers this, because we want to tell our CEOs like, stop making me chase all the things. But I think that it's the goal is to start this groundswell, especially as we head into planning season, around like we've got to start doing the basics really well, because that's what pays off in the long term. What have you been hearing?
I have been hearing nothing like that because I don't talk to marketers. But here's what I'm seeing. There's a lack of focus in operational support. At the end of
Mm,
the day, I think, and I say that on the heels of Burger King coming out with their leader giving their cell phone out, right? Which I think is great. Operational focus needs to take the cake every day,
mhm.
all day. So
Yeah.
we as restaurant owners or operators have to focus on restaurant operations. Restaurant executives have to enable restaurant operations. And then franchisors have to focus on their franchise operations, right? And that is ensuring your franchisees are focused on their business, right? Like
Mhm.
let let let's be dogmatic in certain areas of non-competes, right? So if you are a large franchisor, don't allow your franchisees to distract themselves with multiple investments, right? Like
Mhm.
let them make them focus on the brand that they've committed and that you've built. Second, I
Mhm.
mean, Chick-fil-A is a great example of that, right? Like that hybrid franchise model's got their franchisees are, I mean, primarily, if not
So,
completely
okay.
focused. What?
I'm ready to interrupt.
Interrupt. It's
Okay.
you're the
So
host.
it's
You're the host.
I it's funny that you say that, because that is exactly what I heard in the interviews that I did for the Franchise Leader Spotlight. I said, what does franchising need more of, is kind of my closer question. And hands down, 7 out of the 10 interviews that I did, it was operational excellence and operational focus. And to me, it's coming off of the heels of growth at all costs and growth before profitability. And it's kind of have a reckoning around like, okay guys, we opened all of these units, but now nobody's making money. And so how do we get back to the place where we're actually diving into that operational excellence, operational focus? And I'm interrupting though, because I hate it when
You're the
people
host. You
use
don't interrupt.
I hate it when people use Chick-fil-A as an example of anything in franchising, because that is not a model of franchising that has ever been replicated. And so it's an aspirational, love the aspiration, love the example that it sits, but it truly, I think, is unattainable.
Yeah, no,
Now,
it's a unicorn.
it is, but your point on Burger King though, certainly it's interesting to watch that brand. They went through a major kind of, repositioning, and they're just in a new season of repositioning. And so it's interesting to see how they are taking that repositioning to market. And some of their PR stunts, I think, are pretty smart, like the openness for
I'm
the.
unbelievably like impressed by Burger King. Secondly, I think that franchisors, large ones like McDonald's, all the way down to smaller ones, like you need to make sure your franchisees are invested in their business, right? Like at the end of the day, my reference to Chick-fil-A is simply this, right? Like that, those people are 100% committed to
Yeah.
running their operations, right? So if I'm a franchisor and you are putting money in, whether you're a large investor or just a small person like me, Like we need to ensure you're committed to your operations. Secondly, we need to be committed to our operations, right? So
Mhm.
operational focus. And then look, the other thing I see going on is like no restaurant makes money with a manager or management in store on their computers. Like mitigate the systems, man.
Yep.
Like get people running restaurants, right? And if
Yeah.
you have the ability to have above store support, then that above store support needs to take off the paper grind of restaurant running, right? So
Mhm.
operational focus, operational support. Let's run restaurants that make money and are good for the guest experience and good for the industry. That's what I'm
Well, I think
seeing.
yeah, I think that even ties into what I'm seeing, right? Where and the way I'm going to tie it in is the distraction piece, right? So
Yeah,
you're getting distracted. Marketing gets blamed for all sins, right?
as they should be.
As they should be, yes. But what I see is like a desperation of marketing's not doing this, marketing's not doing that. We're not ahead of the game on showing up in LLMs. Nobody's asking their LLM where they should eat lunch today, right? Like, so let's not focus on the distractions of we're missing out on business because we're not doing something, and then doubling down on the things we should be doing to show up for our guests every day. And that's what the small businesses existed before the internet. So let's get back to some basics.
I absolutely agree. And I would throw in this for the marketers though. Like the operational focus that doesn't mean just focus on what's happening in my restaurant. You do have to drive new traffic and repeat in, right? So,
Mhm.
operational focus from a marketing perspective, in my mind, is enabling the operators to make more money in a more efficient way,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Yep.
Good
We're in
question.
agreement. All right, let's get into our Dear Franny question today. So this is all about selling franchises. So we've been selling franchises, as you should, as a franchisor, but it's been me, the CEO, doing it between everything else. I know I need to build out a real function, but I don't know what that actually looks like or when I'm truly ready. How do I know when it's time to build out a franchise development function, and what do I build first? So I'm going to
Okay.
let you go first, taking a crack at that one.
What the host? Let's the host go first. I'm making a really awesome sign here that I don't know if it's going to work. So this
Well, we
is
are a
what
podcast, so
let's go. This is what I would say you need to make sure you focus on. ULP, unit level profitability. That's it.
mhm.
Like, don't start franchising until you have unit level profitability that can sustain a royalty, right?
Yes,
So I would just
certain
say
point.
to our inquiry person, do you have something that makes money at a unit level? Right? And then can those margins maintain a royalty on top of it and enable a ROIC, a return on invested cash to the franchisee? So that's first. And if it doesn't, then I don't really think you have a franchisable situation from an investment offering perspective. So that's what I
Well, you
would do.
don't think, you know, that it's not a franchisable.
You said it. You're the host. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't. Now, with that being
My
said,
opinion.
it's
My
is it
opinion, you do not have a franchisable concept if the person can't make money and pay royalties at the same time.
I would agree with that. Except asterisk if you need somebody to come in and help you be profitable, meaning like you have a wonderful thing, but your flow through is jacked because you got 47% labor and you don't need 47% labor,
Right.
right? Your
Yeah.
food cost is 82% and your rent structure is jacked, right? Like there are
Mhm.
um top line offerings that have flow through problems because the founder is an artist, right? Or,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
is making all kinds of top line revenue, but 22 people working and 32% paper goods cost, right? Like
Mhm.
maybe there's ways to tweak that down. So back to my artistry. This is why I'm in marketing, ULP
All
all the
right.
time.
So let's assume that this reader has a couple of locations under their belt. They have 5 to 10 franchise locations. They are continuing to grow, but they haven't really built out their franchise development function. Where do you think they start? And I guess I'll
Yeah, you
wade
answer
into
that
this.
question and let me follow you.
Yeah, I'll wade into this because I think that the answer is not as straightforward as as we'd want it to be, because there are just so many options out there when it comes to franchise development support. You could outsource it all with a franchise sales organization, FSO. You can outsource it all kind of ad hoc through a broker network or multiple. And on the top of that, you can build it out in-house. And when you build it out in-house, you really are thinking about, okay, how do you want to build it out? And is it something that is a complement to what you do? Like, are you good at sales? Or are you terrible at sales? If you're good at sales, do you build infrastructure around you? If you're terrible at sales, do you bring on a whole department? And I think adding to that, the vendor landscape in franchise development is so overwhelming and fragmented that it is really hard to navigate who am I bringing on, when am I bringing them on, and how am I going to measure their success. And so I guess the way I think about it is, franchise development sales is a function within your business. It is your business. You are now a franchisor, right? So once you become a franchisor, you have moved from operating a donut stand to now being a franchisor. And so that is a function of your business. And so in that franchise sales development process, you do want to have someone dedicated to vetting your candidates and running them through a process, because without running them through a process, they're going to leave, and you're not going to have the same kind of pipeline as you might have if you have somebody dedicated to it. And so I think the first thing I would say is, yes, you do want to hire someone in-house, whether it's at a coordinator role, a manager role, a director role, who is going to own the function so that you can be the CEO. Because if you are the CEO and running sales, you're doing two jobs, and you're not doing either one well. So I would say you want to hire someone in-house first. And then from there, okay, you think about, how am I getting the people into the pipeline? So that's marketing. And then how am I moving the people through the pipeline? And that's going to include a CRM. That's probably going to include an email platform and a text platform. And then how am I, getting them signed and into my next process, which is opening them. And so that's how I would really think about breaking it down: is I have the function ownable in-house, and then you have marketing and then sales. And how are marketing and sales working together? And then we can talk about how we would build out those two functions within the function.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just laid it out. So whoever listens to us, and I think it's like 400,000 listeners, needs to pause that and just like, rewind it back and listen to it in increments. You're exactly right. But here's what I would say. Here's the debate, right? And I'm going to like go ahead and continue with the artistry today with our charts, which by all means, if somebody wants to put this in the Wall Street Journal, they can. So here's the James Vetrano version of the
James,
money
your
curve.
camera is blurry and
No, it's awesome,
okay,
right? Can you not see it? Like, is
I
that good?
can't see it.
Why can't I see it? Can you see it? Anyway, this is awesome, right?
Yeah, it's
So
awesome.
this is so awesome. And this is what is going to teach everybody how to do it. Okay. So what I there's money in and money out, right? So money out in the franchise world is SG&A oriented or third party oriented, right? And money in is a franchise fees and royalties, right? And so the money out is going to start here and the money in is going to start here. And as my wonderful chart, just like if anybody wants to email us or DM us, I will share this with them. And it's unbelievably impressive, but it's absolutely accurate. The money out is going to go like this. It's going to be up here. And depending on if you're paying that person $1 million or that department $1 million, whatever you're paying them. And then your ramp from money in is going to take a few years. And then hopefully, if it's
Hmm.
doing right, it ends up. And then there's the nexus. And then at that nexus, which is anywhere between year 4 and year 7, is where you start becoming profitable associated with your SG&A and external advertising spend, whatever. Right.
As a franchisor.
As a franchisor, correct. Again, available at www.james.com. But my point is the decision you have to make, and I, was talking to somebody here earlier and they quoted like a $200,000 um, uh, budget, right, for it, right? So the decision you have to make as a burgeoning franchisor is, do I have the capital to invest and the staying power to invest at whatever
Hmm.
that SG&A or third party would be?
Yeah.
I would say that yes, if you can find somebody that is committed and you can bring on and then you add the elements, that's great. Or, I'm not a big FSO fan. I'm not a big broker fan. No offense to them. Like, come at us. It's fun. I'm ready to take it. But, there are other services out there. I have one where, we're called your franchisor, and we kind of co-invest with you in both time and sweat equity on building everything, and then we ride the ride right with you. But that takes the right relationship and the right
Mhm.
people doing it. So to answer our franchise or's dilemma, yeah, you're gonna have to have a gut check of whether you're willing to foot that bill for 3 to 6 years to see that curve, right?
Well, I
And it's
think that
just
yeah, it's a really wish we could have seen your chart, but it was a very
unbelievable.
it is I
It's
believe
so
it. The way you
so good.
described it, I could picture
It's
it.
just don't
But
understand,
it's a good point where it's like eh, whether or not you're just now starting a franchise or you're a couple of franchises in, there
right?
is an investment to be made. It is, it's a spend. It's a spend before you get to the point where you're reaping the benefits of that spend. And so I think the first question to ask is, are you doing it yourself
We're
because you are penny pinching and not investing what you need to invest in order to get the pipeline going? And keep in mind, you really need to be able to invest in developing the infrastructure for your franchisees
yep.
and in the infrastructure to develop a strong pipeline to continue to grow. And
Well, and
both
that's
are
that's
equally
unbelievably wise there, host, right? Like, don't go into franchising thinking like you can mom and pop this, because that's not
Mhm,
the way to do it. You're gonna have to make an investment on behalf of your business and on behalf of the people putting money into franchising
mhm.
with you, right?
Yeah.
It's a long-term thing. It's not a short-term run. You're
Not it's
exactly
not a
right.
short-term run, and I think that the challenge that I see is that, look, in my opinion, your first franchisees need to be your customers. If
Amen.
your first franchisees are not your customers, you may not have a franchisable brand because if you don't have rabid fans that want to bring this to your market, how are you going to convince the people in that market that they should come to your location? And so your first franchisee should be organic. It should be your best friend who really wants to get in because you're killing it. It should be your customers who see what you're doing and they want to bring it to their market. And so your first couple of franchisees you're getting organically and you're not necessarily recognizing, okay, once I'm ready to grow, I really need to invest in developing that pipeline. And the other thing I'd say is that it's your responsibility if when you decide to franchise to continue that growth pipeline. If your dream is to get to 25 locations and stop, you are doing your franchisees a disservice and you are not investing in their long term success because unless you grow and continue to grow, you won't have the funds to continue to invest in the brand and invest in the innovation and the operations and the training that your franchisees need in order to succeed for their 10-year investment. So
My kids would say that's a flow state right there, Catherine. So think I think that's some quotable stuff. I agree.
well, and that's I get frustrated with talking to I've talked to a lot of people who are now franchising and they don't have a location that they don't have a franchise location yet. And so having been in the business as we have for the length of time that we've had, we've seen some bad stuff and we've seen some people's lives get ruined, right? And that's where it's like you really have to think through long term uh, before you decide, well, I'm going to franchise because I surprisingly have heard more than once, I want to franchise because I'm coming up on retirement age and I want to grow this as my retirement plan. And it's very hard for me to keep a straight face when somebody tells me that.
Yeah, I feel like you should not franchise if you're not looking at this from a long-term investment perspective
Mhm,
for
mhm.
your brand. This isn't a short-term fix or a quick exit. It's a long-term, investment play that can be very, very lucrative if done correctly, but can be very, very destructive if done wrong.
Well, tell me, James, in your experience, what has been the biggest mistake that brands have done in their Fran Dev as they're developing out their team?
Well, I think turnover first and foremost. Like turnover at the Fran Dev, Fran Ops level is really destructive for one momentum. but to franchise profitability, right? The franchisee who is completely blindsided by constant change at a leadership level, or the pipeline that is upheaved because of change, like turnover is tough, right?
Mhm.
Secondly, I feel like brands that hit headwinds that are unable to support their franchisees in either royalty abatement or reduction or whatnot is also a problem relative to franchise growth. So I think those are the top two. The third would be like franchising too soon.
Mhm.
Like you're just not
Yeah.
ready yet. Like you don't have the bandwidth. There's just those mature brands that decide to step into franchising impress me, right? And it's funny, there are a lot of mature brands that I push to consider franchising, and they just don't want to, and I can respect that, right? It's sad for the
Mhm.
market, but it's just they're just not there yet. So it's those upstart groups that are doing it maybe for the right reasons, but just aren't holistically and strategically looking at the long-term forecast and investment side of it. It's not a
Mhm.
sprint. It's not a sprint. And I feel like, no shade on the FSOs of the world, but back in the day, what, 5, 7 years ago, like to your point earlier, FSOs were preaching like unparalleled growth and maybe they were yielding it too, but like the actual unit level profitability and or operational structures just weren't there. And
Right.
that regardless of industry is bad for franchising,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So, what about you, marketer extraordinaire?
Uh, I think I'll take it a little bit more micro and speak directly to that franchise development arm of the business, right? So, what
Okay.
you're saying, totally agree with what you're saying. If you do not have strong level economics, if you franchise too early, that all impacts your ability to sell franchises. Period. But I think that on the micro level and the fran dev space, I will say I am the consultant that told James he needs to spend $200,000 to start a fran dev program. And yes, we will debate that later. But I
Next
do
next
think
next
that
podcast is our argument about this budget.
what this budget should be. And look, yes, maybe we can work
Side
our way
note to all
down.
our viewers, 190 grand was to Catherine. Just kidding.
Yeah. That's before my fees, okay? But but to that point, I do think that there is a lack of understanding of what it costs to get an organic lead volume going, which is why people depend on FSOs, which is why people go to the broker route because they've already created pipeline and demand through their channels and they're going to slot your brand into their channels versus your brand creating the demand. Creating demand costs money. And so if you don't have a clear idea of how much you can spend, and look, you know, I, the answer of what your budget is, it's like, okay, how much can you spend? And I'll tell you the cost, according to AFDR of a franchise brand is $17,000 to the average of the marketing cost input needed in order to get one sale. Now, as an industry, we have bloated that number and we've tripled it in the last 5 years by our own design. But that's another discussion. But if you're not ready to say, okay, I'm going to spend $20,000 for every deal that I want, and I want 10 deals, so therefore you need to spend $200,000, you got to look in the mirror and say, like, am I really ready for the kind of growth, or am I ready to fund the kind of growth that I'm responsible for?
Well,
The other,
the host said, I'll interrupt the host. The host said it right. The host said your fans, your customers should be banging on you for
hmm
this. And if
hmm
they're not, then you are going to have to query why not.
yeah,
But if they're not, you're
hmm
going to have to generate momentum and that costs money.
right,
So I interrupted
yeah,
you. Keep going.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side of that, I would say the other mistake is, okay, great, you've got the budget, but now you don't have the process. And you've fallen down on developing the sales process, whether or not it's adding someone to do the sales process for you, or if it's outsourcing it, but making sure that you have somebody that's holding that outsource management team responsible. And I do think that that is why your model with your franchisor is really interesting because you are taking the ownership of the sales process and the onboarding and the launch of the franchise. So it's I think one of the big challenge and why FSOs and brokers really, and to a certain extent, franchise development teams can get a bad rap is because their job is to sell, and then once we sold it, the performance of the franchisee, they have there's no incentive tying them to the performance of the franchisee. And so I think that what is unique and novel about the model that James has is that his performance is tied and he has an incentive tied to the performance of the franchisee, which means you're going to have a little bit of a better vetting process. We didn't even talk about the vetting process, right? Like, you're going to have a
Yeah.
little bit of a better vetting process, and you're going to have a little bit of a better
Well, to
onboarding
your
process.
point, right? And thank you for the compliment. Side note,
Mhm.
if you join your franchisor, I will argue with marketing about their budgets, just
Mhm.
so you know. But the goal here, not on just your franchisor, but in my mind, franchising, is the whole process is interlinked and collaborative and coherent with each other, right? So
Right.
to your point, it can't be a siloed and people pushing their own initiatives. That just ends up with 47 walls in a house that only needs four, right?
Mhm.
So I think the problem I sought to solve is a variety of them, but primarily the one you point out is this is a full out marriage. you
It is.
you can't just be in the dating portion. You can't be in the honeymoon portion. You can't be like it's a full out marriage, and if we don't go into that with a full view of the relationship, and we've talked about this before, right? Like even what's the end look like, right?
Right.
So to your point, I love your micro approach on it, which is really not micro, like to the development team, that focus there and then the process on the back end really gets to the heart of issues that I don't think franchisors spend enough time focusing on. Right?
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
good point. It's a good point. Side note for all of our listeners, hopefully Catherine will put in the comments my artistry when we post it on LinkedIn. I retain all rights to this and I will share it with our co-host, but it's a 80-20. It's an 80-20 split, just so you know.
I have the graph. It will be
There you go.
posted.
There you go.
All right. So, James, what are your top 3 takeaways from today's episode?
I think your perspective on chasing from a franchise, from a marketing perspective is really interesting. It's good to hear a marketer talking about that. Two, I think focusing on the micro, to use your term, aspect of the development spend is really hard for your franchisors to stomach sometimes. And I think, third thing would be it's the long-term view. Like you can't go into this without unit level profitability,
Yep.
and you got to have a long-term view of the relationship and the investment associated with franchising from a franchisor perspective, but also the franchisee's perspective.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's my three. And you have a great haircut.
Well, thank you. My top 3 would be, look, I think that the way that you started the episode around before we even get to Fran Dev, you got to make sure that you have a franchisable concept. And that means that you have unit level profitability that includes the royalty. And I would go further and say it needs to include, in my opinion, it's 10% off the top because you have a royalty that's 5 to 7%. You have a brand fund that's 2-ish%. Then you have your tech fees. And you need those dollars as a franchisor in order to support the franchisee, but they also have to be profitable above and beyond that. So definitely making sure that you're ready to franchise in that respect. I think the other thing that I'm taking is understanding your sales process. And, the listener or the question that we got today is I'm running our sales process. Well, if you're running your sales process, is it really a process or is it when you have time for it? Right. And so understanding and developing that sales process, whether it's something that you're going to do or you're going to hire for. And then my third takeaway would be that it sounds like your franchisor is the next wave of how we should outsource franchise development. And everyone should give James a call to hear his vision and hear if he's a right fit for you
And get the chart.
and get in your
Thanks,
chart.
Hope.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us on this episode of Dear Frannie. If our conversation today felt familiar, you are not alone. You are right on time. And we hope that you share this with somebody who might need to hear it.